Hey everyone, PyroFalkon here, finally back from being a little sick, finally back from my hiatus, and I'm here for a rare webcam appearance as I answer a fan question. One of my fans, DOCTAxSWAG, asked me what my 5 favorite plots in video games were, and I realized that I couldn't just pick 5, so I decided to compile my 10 favorite into this video. Rachel and I had a bit that we were going to do for to introduce this video, but we sort of couldn't do it because we decided to watch episode 1 of season 5 of Flashpoint, and it sort of messed her up.
I was the one who let her run. I had her, hand on shoulder. She was safe.
An 18-year-old girl's dead, and there's nothing right about that.
They shot her, John. She was just trying to save her mom. And her dad was being an asshole.
Anyway, these are, like I said, these are my 10 favorite storylines, not necessarily the 10 best storylines, so please keep that in mind. If you understand the difference between best and favorite, we'll get along just fine. Just for full disclosure, I reviewed this game for IGN Entertainment. The Book of Unwritten Tales is an adventure game that is a parody of other adventure games in Tolkien fantasy. You control 4 characters as they embark on a world-saving adventure filled with puns and unveiled references to other works of fiction. Now, too many comedic works of fiction try to accent their jokes while disregarding the plot until it's too late, and the resulting rush to create a conflict becomes awkward and often nonsensical. The Book of Unwritten Tales avoids this trap because its comedy is well-paced so that it doesn't constantly hit you with a barrage of laughs, but rather meets it out over the course of the plot. The characters are all self-aware, which is generally a trait I enjoy in comedy. The character who kicks off the tale is named Mortimer MacGuffin, for God's sake. But there is a little punch lost as the characters occasionally complain about the situation that the developers put them in. For example, late in the game, one character complains how annoying it is that he has to pick up 3 items to continue the quest, but you as the player are required to find them anyway. The game's writing essentially calls itself out for a trope in a negative light, and referencing something negative but doing it anyway doesn't make for good gameplay. Because it's an adventure game, a lot of the humor is visual in the way the characters interact with the world in each new setting, making for variety from purely verbal jokes, and the artwork is absolutely gorgeous. The gameplay is stellar as well for an adventure game, and it dodges a lot of the problems usually associated with the genre, so that you can enjoy the world and the story without interruption from moon logic puzzles. What's that, you say? Sports games don't have plots? Well, just like Alex Rodriguez, I'm going to use America's pastime and break rules for my own amusement. It's not that MLB The Show has an actual plot, but it was the first sports game I played that featured a Be a Player mode. You create a player of your own design, enter the draft, sign with a team, and try to get into the Hall of Fame. It's a great casual mode for those of us who don't have time to play multiple seasons. Being a player on a team gives you one job: excel. Everything else is left to the AI. Games can be incredibly short depending on the position you want to play. Sometimes as a closing pitcher, the loading screens took longer than my one-pitch appearance. It's for that very reason that this mode becomes a plot. Most kids who enjoy sports dream of being in a position to hit a grand slam to win the World Series. Be a Player gives you that chance to be in that position, to use your skills and timing to achieve that one play, even if that play is smacking a hit directly into the orbital bone of the opposing pitcher. Because you can negotiate your own contract, you can also roleplay anyone you want to be, from the loyal player who sticks with his favorite team to the douchebag who changes teams at the slightest hint of more money. Another series that aces Be a Player mode is the NBA 2K series, since your virtual athlete has interviews and press conferences, spends money on local charities to make fans cheer for him more, and can even be punished if he didn't befriend his teammates. And because you have to spend your salary on skill points, it makes contract negotiations important instead of just being some arbitrary number. Whatever legacy you forge as an athlete, it's your legacy. You will see your characters in dozens of career-defining moments, the same type of moments that all armchair athletes aspire to experience. Catherine is an absolute mind screw with a plot focused on romance and psychological torture, which are not always mutually exclusive. Our protagonist Vincent starts having lucid nightmares after he has second thoughts about his longtime girlfriend when she starts talking about marriage. Combined with an affair with another girl and the mysterious deaths of his neighbors, Vincent tries to figure out a direction for his life over the course of one terrifying week. The bizarre puzzle platformer gameplay was too difficult for my taste and a detriment to the overall experience, but I recognized how it served as literal building blocks to bolster Vincent's courage. His voice in the early nightmares is shaken and worried, and he's unsure of the blocks he moves. His voice becomes stronger as he learns to deal with the puzzles, representing his confrontations with his inner demons and commitment issues. The main device to push the player in the plot is a question and answer confessional at the end of every substage within a nightmare puzzle. Now, I'm probably biased here because I was going through a rough breakup at the time I played the game, but all the questions directly challenge the player on his view of love and commitment. Answering them honestly and hearing the game judge you for it is a sobering experience that holds up a mirror you may not be comfortable looking into. Some of the 8 endings are a little bizarre, but no matter how you play it, Catherine straps you to an emotional rocket and dares you to steer toward paradise, while it does everything in its power to slime you into the ground. Finishing the game will leave you breathless regardless of your ending, and unless you're masochistic enough to love the puzzles, you'll likely not have the stamina to repeat the excellent story.
Oh, it's bad luck to be you. The prophecy is never coming true.
The Bards Tale was an overlooked action RPG released back in 2004. Its overall gameplay fell a little short, but to dismiss the game as a subpar experience would be to ignore a plot that shows other developers how to craft comedy. You know you're in for a treat when even the box art features the bard opting against saving the world in preference for a busty barmaid with cash in one hand and ale in the other. You control the bard through a laundry list of fantasy tropes, from the rat-killing first quest to finding out he is the chosen one. But each plot point comes with a twist, and our bard refuses to do anything until he's promised rewards for his half-hearted toil. In an absolutely brilliant design decision, you'll see that your actions make the world crumble around you. The bard will steadfastly refuse to acknowledge having anything to do with releasing dragons and demons under the populace. It's not his fault townspeople are so squishy. You're accompanied by creatures that you can summon at will. Each one hates his or her life and only acts because they have to, and they'll be sure to tell you about it as you command them. My heart always goes out a bit when I summon the Explorer and he sacrifices himself onto traps so I don't have to, although it doesn't stop me from summoning him again after he dies on yet another spike pit. And who could forget the singing gnome-like Trow who routinely inform you of your futility. Ultimately, the Bard's Tale doesn't have a lot of replayability since the story is pretty much a one-and-done deal, but it's a story that should be experienced if you're tired of saving the world on someone else's terms. Metal Gear is a conspiracy theorist's dream. Over the course of the series, Solid Snake transitions from being a special ops soldier to a man trying to make the world a more peaceful place on his own terms. His goal is simple and noble, but is at odds with a military-industrial complex headed by his genetic father who ultimately wants peace through domination. At first, until he tries to destroy the system he created because it grew too powerful. Metal Gear is a story so convoluted and complex that Metal Gear Solid 4 needed an in-game wiki just to organize and contain the plot. Frankly, you know you're doing something wrong with your fiction when it's a necessity to include it for the player, instead of just being left to hardcore fans to slap onto websites. From Metal Gear Solid 2 onwards, you can tell the writers were retconning so hard they weren't telling a coherent story, but rather shotgunning philosophy and plot twists in the hope that it would all tie together later when the player wasn't paying attention. Also, this.
Raiden, what's your status?
Colonel, I've got Emma Emmerich here. We've managed to avoid drowning.
Yet Metal Gear is a guilty pleasure of mine, one where I enjoyed oohing and ahhing at twist after twist, a plot that essentially relied on a core group of 6 people having an insane amount of control over the world, and with few too many coincidences to properly cite. Seeing Solid Snake confront and surpass obstacle after obstacle was good. Seeing him fail, like the emotional tragic death of Emma in Metal Gear Solid 2, was even better. Snake couldn't save everyone, but he realized that he needed to use his skills to try, else the world would suffer an even greater tragedy than what he himself had experienced. BioWare's epic space opera tells the tale of humanity's recent discovery of other species in the universe and a coming interstellar apocalypse. With dozens of important choices to make, your specific tale is shaped uniquely throughout the series' 3 games. Ironically, I was actually disappointed by the first game when, at the time, I thought your choices meant nothing. The game played out the exact same way, other than a few mission objectives or dialogues changing, and your ending came from one single choice deep in the game. It was only after the second game came out that I realized the brilliance of Mass Effect, prompting me to go back and complete Mass Effect 1 5 times with different choices just to see how it would work out in Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2 itself was damn near the most perfect plot I had ever experienced, since not only was it able to roll with the decisions you made in the original, but the plot within Mass Effect 2 was fantastic even standing alone. The tale of trying to assemble a squad that will knowingly embark on a suicide mission became a driving force to explore every dialogue option, every choice, and every cutscene in as many different ways as possible. Unlike popular opinion, I didn't aggressively dislike Mass Effect 3 or its original ending, but the game didn't have the same life. The characters became a little thinner in the final part of the trilogy. The story became more focused on the bigger picture. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it felt more like a standard shooter and less like an individual tale that I was crafting. I only beat it once and had no desire to go back and explore the paths I didn't take. Still, the series as a whole has created a universe with a lot of depth. Commander Shepard may be gone, but the various planets and cultures can be revisited many times on infinite points of the fictional timeline.
War. War never changes.
And neither do awesome stories. The post-apocalyptic world of Fallout is lifeless, lawless, and depressing as hell, which is exactly as it should be. It's strange because no particular Fallout game greatly intrigues me in a vacuum. The core games are all great, don't get me wrong, but I'm more interested in the overall storyline for the Fallout universe. It's grounded enough in reality that a US-Chinese exchange of nuclear missiles is plausible no matter how improbable, especially given the game's alternate take on post-World War II history. My favorite part of the Fallout universe is the psychologically sick vaults. By far, my most excited moments came when I was exploring a vault and trying to figure out what experiment its creators inflicted on its people and why they went horribly wrong. From Vault 11's tragic experiment on human sacrifice to Vault 108's Gary clones, the vaults collectively told the story of indifference of the Vault-Tec scientists who controlled the ultimately futile experiments. The Fallout series is one of those overarching tales in which the more I know about it, the more I want to know about it, and each game makes the entire experience that much richer. Whether or not you consider it a true game, there is no argument that Analog: A Hate Story features one of the finest pieces of writing in software. Rather than bothering with tropes or rehashed plots, Christine Love combines space fantasy with a seriously depressing period of Korean history, where men are everything and a woman's only daily decision is how low she can grovel to her husband's desires. The plot starts off as depressingly as can be, as you find floating in the void an otherwise empty spaceship full of corpses. Through old diary and text logs from the deceased inhabitants, you slowly start to see just how far human depravity can go for something as ultimately meaningless as social status and traditionalism. There aren't too many details of the plot that I wish to give away. Because of the nature of it, I feel that it's a story you should fully experience blind. You'll read the tale of one particular girl who chose to fight against the traditional practice as she attempts to become her own person who makes her own decisions and is owned by no one. A part of you will despise what you read. The girl's ultimate fate and what she had to endure triggered real anger in me. Analog is one of the very few games that invoked an actual emotion as I tried in vain to influence events that had long since passed, events that I merely stumbled onto that I could only experience secondhand. It's a story I'll never forget, though its details I hope are never repeated. Heavy Rain tells the tragic tale of a man who's already lost one son to a car accident and now loses another due to a kidnapping. No child kidnapped by the so-called origami killer have ever been found alive, and this desperate father proceeds to move heaven and earth to find his son regardless of the personal risk. Or not. The beauty of Heavy Rain is that your actions or inactions decide the outcome of the tale. The main characters can die, but the story will continue. The developers, artists, and voice actors needed to be ready for almost any outcome the player would create. Yes, there are plot holes, including a massive one that allows one character to get a clue she had no business knowing. But the twists, challenges, and setbacks all the characters discover and endure keep you guessing as to what will happen next. And by making you responsible for the character's every action, from walking and fighting to simply trying to heat up a pizza, it forces you to create an emotional connection with them. That you wind up playing as the killer for 3 hours and seeing how your actions have allowed evidence against him to be destroyed hurts you that much more as you feel responsible for keeping the child away from his father, and all that much more satisfying when, or if, you take down the killer once and for all. I wasn't sure whether this one should count, given that it's basically a tweaked version of the movie plot, hence the honorable mention rather than a proper entry. And given that The Godfather is my favorite movie of all time, it's no surprise that I would absolutely dig the game, even though the gameplay itself was a little lacking. For all the deserved criticism of Electronic Arts, their developers are generally skilled people, and they pulled off a minor miracle with The Godfather. Rather than trying to pull a new story out of the ether, they gently manipulated the plot to insert your custom-made character into all the important moments, from being the guy to cut off the head of Jack Woltz's prized stud and sticking it in his bed, to being the hitman tasked with murdering the heads of the 5 families. Your actions not only unite New York under the rule of the Corleones, but you become the Don as Michael and the other main protagonists move to Las Vegas. I can see that there were some missteps with the plot and presentation. The absence of many of the stars of the movie, especially Al Pacino, leaves a black eye on the immersion of the game. However, imagination is a great equalizer, and it doesn't take too long of a leap to put yourself in the shoes of your alter ego as you lay waste to Sonny's murderers and defend Vito in the hospital. The movie was brilliant, the game less so, but it's a story of family bonds that is easily understandable and, in a strange way, somewhat relatable. If you've watched my other videos, you've likely heard me give my love to Final Fantasy VI on more than one occasion. There's no way around it, and I'll confess it again. It's my favorite game of all time. The legacy and everlasting effect it had on me transcends the game itself. Most of my professional career, from my employment with IGN Entertainment and Online Onslaught to several personal projects, have come as a result from Squaresoft's masterpiece. I've considered making a full Let's Play of it, but it would more than likely turn into a 60-hour juicy verbal orgasm that I'm not sure anyone wants to hear. I've beaten it at least 10 times across the various platforms, and I'm still not bored with it. So sure, I may be biased, but that doesn't mean my love for the game is misplaced. Final Fantasy VI created a story that balanced depth with brevity, giving you information about the characters and fragile political state of the world without overwhelming you with unnecessary fluff. The protagonists are fully fledged, three-dimensional characters with sensible motivations and desires. As the game progresses, you start to understand where everyone came from and how their fates are interconnected. They question themselves and their own commitments to a hopeless fight, but they find inner strength and move past the demons that keep them from achieving their full potential. These are men and women, and a Moogle and a Sasquatch, whose lives were irreparably damaged, and rather than wallow in self-pity and whine about their fates, they find each other and band together to remove a sociopath from the world. Meanwhile, our primary antagonist, Kefka, doesn't have the typical game plot of needing or wanting anti-hero motivations for his devilish actions. He poisons a river to kill the entire population of a castle, including young children, then laughs over the corpses. He screams hate a dozen times when describing his feelings of the heroes. He kills all the adults in one town simply because they refuse to bow to him. He may start off as a general for the evil empire, but madness and bloodlust overtake him, and he becomes a demigod of destruction and terror. By the time you confront him for the epic final battle, he no longer desires to rule anything, and simply wants to obliterate every last living thing on the planet, completely apathetic or oblivious to the fact that he himself would likely perish as a result. His mind becomes a cesspool of savagery and horror, and only our protagonists stand in the way between him and the end of existence. And when the battle is over, we bear witness to one of the greatest epilogues in all of video games. Every character on your roster is treated to their own mini cutscene as they share their thoughts on the disaster and their plans to adjust to a post-war life. The moral isn't about using violence to overcome the war. The moral is about hope and the process of recovery. If any RPG needed a sequel, it would be Final Fantasy VI, as we try to understand just how far-reaching Kefka's violence spread and how committed our heroes are to helping the survivors. Final Fantasy VI tells a complete story with closure, but it's not enough. We need to see how the children grow up under Terra's guidance and protection. We need to experience Locke and Celeste's love as it blooms in the wake of their sorrow for their dead friends and family. We must know whether the world grows into a safe environment for the next generation. We are left with optimism, but a sense of longing, as we hear the haunting melody of the Crystal theme as it serenades our heroes to a new age of peace and responsibility, a tale that is as yet unwritten, but no less important than the journey on which we accompanied them. So that's it. Those are my 10 Are you alright?
I will be.
Those are my 10 favorite video game plot lines. If there's any that you think I missed, let me know in the comments below and I'll record them for future episodes, because remember, at PyroFalkon's Let's Play Extravaganza, this is your... you are staining my jersey here.
They shot her, John.
They did shoot her. It's only fiction.
It was her birthday.
It was
My
only...
mom had to go home to all the boxes they'd unpacked and the champagne glasses.
It's... Around here, it's your Let's Play. Are you sure you're... Do you want to go back to...
I'll be fine.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
be fine. Just hold me.
There. It's okay.
No, it's not.
Okay, God.